Welcome aboard the Ferry of Knowledge. My name is Luca, and I'll be your captain tonight. As we begin our journey, find a comfortable position, somewhere you can rest, and allow the day to slowly loosen its hold. In a moment, we'll set sail together, leaving behind noise, distraction, and the weight of the waking world. Take a deep breath in through the nose and out through the mouth as the ferry of knowledge quietly departs. Long before heroes measured their lives by feats, before cities learned to build walls, the golden apples came into existence as a gift and a warning. They were given on the day Hera was wed, a wedding meant to stabilize the order of the world. The earth itself, embodied by Gaia, brought forth the apples as a symbol of permanence. Their skin shone like polished metal, untouched by rot or time. And within them rested a simple, dangerous promise: renewal without decay. Whoever possessed them would never truly fade. Hera accepted the gift and almost immediately understood its danger. Immortality, when left unguarded, invites theft. And theft of this kind reshapes the world. The apples could not remain near the seats of power, nor could they be destroyed. So Hera did what the gods often did when something was too powerful to solve cleanly. She hid it. At the far edge of the world, where land thinned into mystery and the sky felt closer to the ground, a garden was established. It was fertile beyond reason, fed by ancient soil and watered by springs untouched by time. To tend it, Hera placed the Hesperides, nymphs of evening and soft light, careful and enduring, but never meant to defend against force. For that, something else was required. Ladon came into being for a purpose that allowed no ambiguity. Born from ancient lineage, some say from Phorcys and Ceto, others from darker roots tied to the oldest monsters. Ladon was shaped not as a roaming terror, but as a fixed answer to a fixed problem. His body was long and coiling, scaled like burnished bronze and deep green stone. Along his length rose many heads, each alert, each watching from a different angle, ensuring that nothing approached unseen. Most importantly, Ladon did not sleep. He was placed at the center of the garden and bound to it. The task was absolute. No hand was to take the apples, not mortal, not divine. No exception was named because none was expected. For a long time, the system worked. The Hesperides sang as they tended the trees. The apples ripened and remained where they hung. Visitors came rarely, and when they did, they turned back. Ladon did not chase. He did not threaten. His presence was enough. Coiled around the tree, eyes always open, he turned curiosity into retreat and ambition into caution. Word spread slowly, then more quickly. Stories moved faster than Ladon ever could. Tales of a tree that granted renewal, a fruit that defied age, of a guardian who could not be tricked. Some dismissed the rumors. Others believed and stayed away. A few listened more carefully, storing the knowledge for a day when need would outweigh fear. That day came when a man burdened by tasks that were never meant to be survivable was given one final command. He was told to bring back the golden apples. The command did not come with instructions, only expectation. The man who received it already understood what that meant. His name was Heracles, and by the time the golden apples were named, his life had been reduced to a sequence of ordeals designed to exhaust him. Each task he completed only proved that another, more difficult one could be demanded. Strength had made him useful. Survival had made him convenient. The apples were meant to be the last task. They were chosen precisely because they were unreachable. Heracles knew this. So did the one who ordered it, Eurystheus, a man who ruled from safety and measured success by distance from danger. Sending Heracles for the apples was not strategy. It was hope disguised as command. Hope that the world would finally solve the problem of Heracles by ending him. But Heracles had learned something through his labors. Some challenges could not be met head-on. The journey itself took him far beyond familiar roads. He crossed lands that knew nothing of kings or laws, places where survival depended on reading the land rather than commanding it. Along the way, he asked questions, not carelessly, but with intent. He listened for consistency in the stories, for details that repeated even when the telling changed. Always, the same truths emerged. The garden lay at the edge of the world. The apples granted renewal beyond ordinary immortality. And a dragon stood watch, one that never slept. Heracles did not hurry toward that knowledge. He carried it, turning it over as he traveled, weighing what it implied. A guardian that never slept could not be waited out. One that did not roam could not be drawn away easily. Whatever approach he chose would need to account for permanence. Meanwhile, at the edge of the world, Ladon continued his watch. He felt the approach long before Heracles came within sight of the garden. Not through sound or movement, but through imbalance. The world shifted subtly when something persistent drew near. Ladon had sensed it before. Lesser intrusions, fleeting ambitions. But this felt different. This presence did not flicker. It advanced steadily, day after day, shaped by necessity rather than curiosity. The Hesperides noticed it as well. They paused more often in their tending. Their songs softened, losing their rhythm. They spoke among themselves in lowered voices, recalling older warnings, older promises. The garden had been untouched for generations, yet it had never been declared unreachable forever. That omission now weighed heavily. When Heracles finally reached the threshold, he stopped. The garden revealed itself gradually. Fertility gave way to order. Wild growth softened into intention. At the center, the tree stood exactly as the stories described, its apples unmoved by wind, glowing with a light that did not belong to the sun. And around it, Ladon. Heracles did not advance. He studied. The dragon's coils were positioned with precision, not laziness. Each head faced a different direction, covering approaches Heracles had not yet considered. There was no opening to exploit, no blind angle to test. This was not a creature waiting to be provoked. This was a system designed to hold. Heracles understood then why force alone would fail. Ladon had been created for this moment long before Heracles had been born. And for the first time since receiving the command, Heracles questioned whether the task was meant to be completed at all. Heracles withdrew from the garden without being seen. He did not retreat in defeat, but in calculation. The sight of Ladon had answered questions that no rumor could settle. Strength alone would be wasted here. The dragon's body formed a living barrier, and his many heads ensured that no approach went unobserved. There would be no sudden rush, no blind spot to exploit. Anyone who tried to force their way through would simply be worn down and crushed. So Heracles did what the labors had taught him to do when strength reached its limit. He sought context. Not far from the garden, the world changed. The fertile edge gave way to older, harsher land, where the ground bore the marks of beings who had walked it long before cities learned their names. There, Heracles found the Titan who carried the sky. Atlas stood bent beneath the vast weight of the heavens, his knees locked, his arms raised, his body fixed in an unending strain. The air around him felt heavier, as though the sky itself pressed closer to the earth. Heracles watched for a long moment before speaking, measuring the truth of what he saw. This was another guardian, different in form, different in task, yet bound by the same kind of sentence: hold this forever. Heracles approached openly. Atlas had no reason to fear him. No one attacked a being who already carried the world. "I seek the golden apples," Heracles said plainly. "You know the way." Atlas did not turn his head, yet his voice answered, low and rough from ages of endurance. He knew the apples well. He knew the garden, and he knew the dragon that guarded it. "I can retrieve them," Atlas said after a pause. "Ladon does not bar my path." There was a condition implied in the silence that followed. Heracles understood it immediately. "I will hold the sky while you are gone," he replied. The exchange changed everything. For the first time in ages, Atlas felt the possibility of movement. For the first time, Heracles stepped into a burden greater than any labor yet assigned. When Atlas carefully transferred the weight of the heavens onto Heracles' shoulders, the ground groaned beneath the shift. Muscles locked, breath slowed. The sky did not forgive mistakes. Atlas departed without ceremony. At the garden, Ladon sensed the change. The approach this time carried a different signature. It was not the steady resolve of Heracles, nor the hesitant curiosity of lesser beings. It was something older, heavier, and familiar. Ladon recognized Atlas immediately. He did not tighten his coils. He did not shift position. Atlas belonged to the order of things that existed before rules were written. Atlas entered the garden and moved toward the tree without resistance. The Hesperides watched in silence as he reached up and took the apples. Ladon remained coiled, eyes tracking every motion, yet no strike came. This was not theft. This was removal sanctioned by a deeper balance than the one Ladon enforced. When Atlas left, apples in hand, the garden felt altered, though nothing had yet changed. And far away, Heracles stood beneath the sky, learning what it meant to hold something that was never meant to be carried. Heracles held the sky longer than he expected. At first, the weight arrived as pressure, vast, immediate, and crushing. Then it became something more precise. The heavens did not simply rest on his shoulders. They demanded balance. Every slight shift sent strain through his arms and spine. He could not bend. He could not step. Even breath required intention. This was not a test of strength alone. It was a test of endurance without movement. Time passed differently beneath the sky. Heracles marked it by the ache in his muscles and the slow burn along his shoulders. He had lifted mountains, wrestled beasts, endured wounds that would have broken other men. This was different. This was continuous. There was no strike to answer, no enemy to overcome, only holding. When Atlas returned, the apples gleaming in his hands, the Titan did not rush. For the first time in ages, he stood upright. His shoulders rolled slightly, unfamiliar with freedom. The sky, balanced on Heracles, remained steady, indifferent to the exchange that had allowed it. Atlas studied Heracles with something like curiosity. "You have strength," he said, "and patience." There was no cruelty in his voice, only opportunity. Atlas spoke of taking the apples himself to their destination, sparing Heracles the burden of travel. He offered it as relief, as kindness, as a solution. Heracles listened, unmoving. He had learned by now that offers often hid conclusions already decided. "I agree," Heracles said at last. "But first, take the sky back for a moment, just long enough for me to adjust my grip." Atlas hesitated. The request was small, reasonable. He had carried the sky for ages. One more moment seemed trivial. Carefully, he stepped forward and reclaimed the weight, settling it back onto his own shoulders. Heracles straightened. Then, without ceremony, he took the apples. Atlas realized too late what had happened. The exchange was complete. The burden restored. The task undone. Heracles departed without lingering. He did not run. He did not boast. The apples were not trophies. They were obligations, heavy in a different way than the sky. At the garden, Ladon felt the absence fully now. The apples were gone. The tree stood unburdened. The system he had guarded no longer existed. There was no command that told him what followed. No instruction beyond the one he had already fulfilled. When Heracles returned to the garden's edge, he did not re-enter it. He passed by without challenge, the task already complete. Ladon did not pursue. There was nothing left to defend. Soon after, the balance shifted again. The apples would not remain in mortal hands. Their return was arranged. The garden, once central to the world's safeguards, faded into distance. The Hesperides departed, their role concluded as cleanly as Ladon's, and Ladon himself. Some say Heracles struck him during an earlier version of the task, ending the guardianship by force. Others say the dragon's role simply concluded, and his form was lifted into the sky, where his endless vigilance could continue without burden. What remained constant was this: the apples did not pass freely. The task was never simple, and the guardian did exactly what he was created to do. With the apples gone and the command fulfilled, The place that had once felt fixed at the edge of the world began to loosen its hold on importance. The garden did not collapse. It did not wither. It simply ceased to be a destination. Without the apples, its purpose changed. The tree still stood, rooted deep in ancient soil, its branches spreading wide beneath a sky that now passed overhead without pause. The springs still flowed. The land remained fertile. Yet the pull that had drawn whispers, rumors, and ambition across generations faded, as if a tension long held had finally been released. Ladon remained where he had always been, for a time. No command arrived to replace the one that had guided him since his creation. The condition he had been made to enforce no longer existed, and without it, the structure of his guardianship dissolved. He did not rage. He did not seek new purpose. The logic of his existence was simpler than that. A task completed did not demand replacement. In some tellings, this was the moment when Heracles faced Ladon directly, striking him down as the final obstruction before the apples could be taken. In others, the dragon was spared that ending, his vigilance deemed fulfilled rather than broken. These versions do not cancel one another. They circle the same truth from different angles. The world no longer required a dragon at the tree. What happened next unfolded quietly. Ladon's presence withdrew from the garden, not in retreat, but in conclusion. The force that had bound him to that place released its hold. Where his coils had pressed into the earth, deep impressions remained, marks that would outlast memory. Creatures passing near slowed instinctively, sensing that something immense had once rested there. Above, the sky accepted him. His form was lifted into the night, stretched into a winding path of stars that traced the long shape of a guardian at rest. There, his many watching heads became points of steady light. Sailors learned the pattern. Shepherds followed it across the seasons. The dragon's shape did not threaten, it guided. Below, the story continued without him. Heracles returned the apples as required. They passed briefly through mortal hands and were then removed from reach once more. Power that unsettles the world was never meant to remain where it could be claimed. The cycle closed as it had opened, with concealment, not destruction. And so the outcome settled into place. The apples endured, guarded by distance rather than teeth. The hero completed a task designed to end him, and the dragon, created solely to prevent a single outcome, became something quieter and longer lasting than any obstacle. A marker. In the sky, Ladon no longer blocked a path. He marked one. A reminder of where limits had once been drawn, and why. Long after the garden slipped from maps and memory, its influence continued to surface in unexpected ways. Travelers who ventured too far west spoke of land that felt deliberately empty, as though something important had once stood there and been carefully removed. Nothing barred their path, yet few lingered. The place carried a sense of conclusion, not danger, an ending rather than a warning. Stories adapted. Some told of a dragon slain by force, a final obstacle overcome by unmatched strength. Others spoke of a guardian who stepped aside when the balance of the world required it. Both versions endured because both explained something people needed to understand: that power alone never decides what is allowed to remain. Ladon's name faded from common speech, yet his role did not. The pattern he represented, containment rather than conquest, reappeared elsewhere. Sacred objects were hidden instead of displayed. Dangerous knowledge was sealed away rather than erased. Boundaries were drawn not to provoke challenge, but to prevent temptation. These decisions echoed the same logic that had once placed a dragon at the roots of a tree. The stars that bore Ladon's shape moved slowly across the seasons, reliable and unchanged. Mariners learned to trust them. They did not ask why the pattern existed, only that it did. When clouds parted and the winding line appeared overhead, it confirmed direction. East and west regained meaning. Distance became measurable again. Below, the world continued its work. Kings ruled and fell. Cities rose near coasts once thought unreachable. The apples were spoken of less often, mentioned more as legend than desire. What they promised was no longer imagined as attainable, and so ambition turned elsewhere. This too was part of Ladon's legacy. The world does not only need heroes to take things, it needs guardians to ensure some things are never taken at all. And when the need passes, it needs the restraint to let guardians go. The story of the garden settled into the deeper layers of memory, where meaning outlasts detail. What people remembered most clearly was not the apples themselves, nor even the hero who carried them away, but the idea that some powers demanded separation. The golden fruit had promised renewal, yet the world had been shaped carefully so that promise could never be pursued freely. That lesson endured long after the garden itself became unreachable. Ladon's role clarified with time. He was never meant to challenge the world forever. He existed to delay it, to place distance between desire and fulfillment long enough for balance to hold. In that sense, his success was measured by how little happened while he watched. Centuries passed without catastrophe because the temptation remained contained. This kind of victory left no monuments. There were no songs sung at festivals for Ladon. No cities bore his name. Yet his influence persisted in subtler ways. Rulers learned to hide what could destabilize their realms. Sacred objects were buried, sealed, or entrusted to places few could reach. Knowledge that could not be unlearned was wrapped in ritual and restraint. Again and again, the same pattern appeared. Guard first, reveal only when necessary, except that some doors should remain closed. Above, the stars carried on. The winding shape attributed to Ladon remained visible across generations, steady and unchanging. Unlike brighter constellations that announced themselves, his presence required patience to recognize. Those who traced it learned to slow their gaze, to follow continuity rather than spectacle. It was fitting. Ladon had never been loud. He had never pursued attention. His strength had always been consistency. Below, life moved on without needing him. The systems he had supported adjusted and endured. The world did not collapse in his absence. That, too, was part of his purpose. True guardianship does not create dependence. It creates stability strong enough to continue when the guardian is gone. And so Ladon's story concluded in the same manner it had been lived, quietly, completely, without excess. As centuries passed, fewer voices spoke the names tied to the garden. Yet the structure of the story remained intact. When people tried to explain why certain things were kept beyond reach, why some knowledge was restricted, why some power was hidden rather than claimed, they often reached for older language. They spoke of boundaries set by the world itself, of limits that existed before law, before custom. Even when Ladon's name was forgotten, the reasoning that had created him endured. The golden apples became a reference point rather than a desire. They appeared in teachings as an example of power that solves one problem by creating many others. Renewal without consequence sounded appealing, yet the world had learned that such gifts distort balance. Lives lose urgency when endings disappear. Effort weakens when time becomes endless. The apples were removed not because they were evil, but because they were incompatible with the rhythm of the world. That understanding traced back to the moment they were hidden. Ladon had enforced that decision without interpretation. He did not weigh outcomes or question motives. His presence ensured that the choice to conceal the apples could not be reversed casually. In doing so, he protected not just the gods' order, but the structure of mortal life itself. The sky reflected this permanence. The constellation associated with Ladon did not dominate the heavens. It did not blaze. It remained stretched and winding, visible only to those who searched patiently. Navigators came to value it precisely for that reason. It did not shift unexpectedly. It did not vanish with changing seasons. It offered reference rather than spectacle. Below, the places once influenced by the garden grew ordinary again. Paths crossed through the land without resistance. Grass reclaimed old impressions. The springs continued to flow, no longer guarded, no longer coveted. Nothing marked the spot as sacred, except a lingering sense that something deliberate had once been completed there. This was how Ladon's work ended, not with collapse, but with normalization. The world did not miss what it no longer needed, and because of that, the balance he had upheld remained intact. The story closed the way many necessary things do, by becoming unnecessary. Once the apples were no longer sought, once their promise no longer tempted, the garden's absence stopped being noticed. It was not erased, it simply ceased to matter. The world adjusted itself around that loss with quiet efficiency, as though it had always been meant to. Those who studied old accounts noticed something curious. The most disruptive moments in the story were never the dragon's presence, nor even the hero's success. The greatest tension existed before the garden was hidden, when the apples were still close enough to imagine possessing. Once distance was imposed, once a guardian made access impossible, desire weakened. Conflict faded before it could fully form. This, more than any battle, was Ladon's achievement. He did not change the world by acting upon it. He changed it by preventing action long enough for urgency to pass. By remaining where he was placed, doing exactly what was required and nothing more, he allowed time to resolve what force could not. In later ages, when people wondered why some things were locked away, why certain powers were buried rather than used, the explanation often ended the same way. Because access changes behavior. Because limits preserve balance. Because not everything meant to exist is meant to be reached. The dragon in the sky remained as proof, not of danger, but of decision. A reminder that restraint is sometimes the most effective form of strength, and that endurance can shape outcomes more reliably than force. Ladon's watch had ended, yet its effect continued, folded into the structure of the world itself. And so the night carried on, steady and untroubled, guided by patterns laid down long before anyone thought to look for them. Nothing more needed to happen. The balance held. The consequences of the task unfolded slowly, but they unfolded completely. After Heracles returned the apples, they did not remain where he placed them. They were never intended to. Their brief passage through mortal hands fulfilled the condition of the labor, nothing more. Soon after, the apples were taken once again beyond reach, removed from the world in a way that did not require a new guardian, a new garden, or a new warning. Distance itself became the safeguard. With that removal, the chain of cause that had begun with Hera's wedding gift finally closed. The apples no longer invited pursuit. No rumors spread. No heroes set out in search of them. The danger they posed faded, not because it was defeated, but because it was rendered irrelevant. This was the final outcome Ladon had existed to ensure. The garden, emptied of its role, did not disappear. It remained as land often does when history moves past it, quiet, fertile, and unremarkable. Paths crossed it without ceremony. Nothing marked it as the edge of the world any longer. Whatever power had once gathered there had completed its purpose and withdrawn. Ladon did not return. Whether he fell earlier by force, or whether his watch simply ended when the apples were removed, his presence was no longer required. The world did not replace him. No second guardian was created. No new command followed. The absence itself confirmed success. Above, the stars preserved the shape of what had been. The long, winding constellation associated with Ladon remained fixed in the night sky, unchanged across seasons. It did not announce danger. It did not promise reward. It simply endured, marking a decision that had already been made and would not be revisited. Below, life continued without awareness of what had been prevented. Mortals aged. Cities rose and fell. Power shifted hands, as it always had. And because the apples were gone, none of it was distorted by the promise of endless renewal. Effort retained its value. Time retained its weight. Endings still mattered. That balance was the result of restraint, not conquest. Ladon had been created to ensure that something would not happen, and in that, he succeeded fully. When his task ended, the world required nothing further from him. His role concluded without collapse, without celebration, without need for memory. That is how true guardianship ends, not with recognition, not with reward, but with a world that no longer needs to be guarded. The underworld did not need conquest. It needed separation. When the realms of existence settled into order, the boundary between the living and the dead became one of the most delicate balances in the world. Life moved forward through change and motion. Death required stillness, continuity, and restraint. Without a clear division, both would fracture. This responsibility fell to Hades. His domain lay beneath the surface of the world, vast and layered, shaped not by punishment alone, but by structure. Paths extended outward endlessly, carrying souls away from the noise of life and into quiet permanence. Rivers marked transitions. Gates defined thresholds. Yet one problem remained unresolved. The dead, once arrived, stayed. The living, however, were unpredictable. Grief pulled people downward. Love tempted them to follow. Curiosity drove some too close. And gods, unconstrained by mortality, passed between realms freely, leaving traces of instability behind them. The boundary required enforcement, not cruelty, not violence, consistency. Hades understood this better than anyone. His role demanded patience rather than dominance, containment rather than threat. The underworld did not need fear to function. It needed certainty. Cerberus was shaped for this purpose. He was not created to hunt the living, nor to punish the dead. He was formed to stand at the threshold, facing outward, ensuring that what entered remained, and what belonged above did not wander downward uninvited. His form reflected this responsibility. 3 heads rose from a single powerful body, each alert and attentive. They did not act independently. They watched together, sharing awareness rather than competing for it. Where one saw hesitation, another saw intent. No movement passed unnoticed. His body carried weight without aggression. Broad shoulders anchored him firmly to the ground. Thick limbs held him steady across stone, worn smooth by centuries of passage. His presence filled the gateway completely, leaving no space to slip past unnoticed. Around his neck coiled serpents, living extensions of vigilance rather than ornament. They shifted subtly, sensing movement, tasting the air, responding to changes too small for eyes to catch. Their presence reinforced what Cerberus embodied: awareness without distraction. He learned quickly. The dead approached without resistance. Their movement slowed naturally as they neared the gate, guided by exhaustion rather than force. Cerberus allowed them through without reaction, recognizing the quiet certainty that marked arrival. The living felt different. Heartbeat, warmth, restlessness. Cerberus sensed these immediately. His attention sharpened, heads lifting slightly, bodies tensing without motion. A low sound formed in his chest, not a threat, but a warning carried through vibration rather than volume. Most turned back. Those who did not found themselves stopped without struggle. Cerberus did not chase. He did not need to. The boundary held because he held it. Time passed differently at the gate. Centuries unfolded without boredom or fatigue. Cerberus did not measure existence through change. His role remained constant, his awareness unbroken. The gate became an extension of him, and he of it. The underworld stabilized around this certainty. Souls moved inward. Life remained above. Balance held. And Cerberus stood unmoving, facing the world of the living, not as a beast to be feared, but as the final certainty that some thresholds are not meant to be crossed twice. Cerberus did not learn loyalty. It was built into him. From the moment he took his place at the gate, his awareness aligned itself with a single principle: maintain the boundary. Everything else arranged itself around that purpose. Hunger, rest, attention, all of it bent naturally toward the role he held. His three heads did not argue or compete. They functioned as one awareness, divided across angles. One watched the approach of new arrivals. Another tracked movement along the threshold itself. The third remained fixed outward, sensing the living world beyond the gate. Together, they formed a continuous field of attention that never narrowed or drifted. This arrangement created calm. Cerberus did not react impulsively. He evaluated presence through consistency rather than surprise. The dead carried a particular stillness, a heaviness that settled as they neared the gate. Their movement slowed. Their intent dissolved into acceptance. Cerberus recognized this immediately and allowed passage without interference. The living arrived differently. Their energy reached him before they did. Breath, warmth, hesitation, urgency. These signals carried tension. Cerberus did not need to see them clearly to know they did not belong. His posture adjusted subtly, weight shifting forward just enough to close space without aggression. This distinction defined his judgment. He did not weigh worth or intention. He did not respond to emotion. He enforced condition. Belonging mattered more than desire. Purpose outweighed pleading. Time reinforced this clarity. As centuries passed, Cerberus encountered every variation of approach. Grieving lovers drawn too far by loss. Heroes confident in strength. Wanderers driven by curiosity rather than need. Gods passing through with ease that ignored consequence. Each encounter refined his understanding. The dead moved inward. The living moved outward. Anything that blurred this distinction met resistance immediately. Cerberus did not enjoy this work. He did not resent it either. Emotion did not complicate his role. Satisfaction came from completion rather than reward. Each moment the gate held steady confirmed that balance remained intact. That was enough. The serpents around his neck responded alongside him. They reacted to changes in air and intention, tightening or loosening subtly as movement approached. Their awareness extended his own, reinforcing vigilance without distraction. Together, they formed a system that never slept. Cerberus remained at his post without rest. Fatigue did not reach him in the way it reached others. His body regenerated through stillness. His strength renewed itself through purpose. As long as the gate existed, so did his clarity. The underworld relied on this consistency. Souls passed without disruption. Paths remained orderly. The separation between realms held firm. What could have become chaos settled instead into rhythm. Cerberus became part of that rhythm. He did not guard through threat. He guarded through certainty. And because of that, the boundary endured. Not as a barrier enforced by fear, but as a truth that required no explanation. Most living souls never reached the gate. They turned back long before Cerberus needed to move. The weight of the underworld pressed gently but firmly on those who did not belong, thinning resolve, slowing steps, encouraging retreat without confrontation. A few continued anyway. These were not wanderers or mourners pulled too far by grief. They arrived with intention, carrying purpose sharpened through preparation. Cerberus recognized the difference immediately. Their movement lacked hesitation. Their breath remained steady. Their presence carried resolve rather than confusion. He rose slightly when they approached, not as threat, as assessment. The first to stand before him in this way was Heracles. He did not rush the gate. He did not raise his weapon. He stopped at a distance and held still, allowing the underworld to press against him fully. His strength did not resist the weight. It accepted it, grounding itself into the stone beneath his feet. Cerberus studied him. 3 heads watched in silence, each reading a different layer of presence. One measured strength, immense, controlled, familiar. Another sensed mortality, undeniable, heavy, finite. The third registered authority, not dominance, but permission carried through lineage and intent. Heracles carried none of the frantic energy Cerberus had learned to refuse. He moved forward only when the moment allowed it. The encounter unfolded without chaos. Cerberus stepped forward, closing space deliberately. The serpents around his neck tightened, alert but calm. The air thickened with awareness rather than hostility. This was not a battle seeking outcome. It was an evaluation, testing condition. Heracles reached out with restraint. He did not strike. He did not provoke. He met weight with weight, strength with structure, grounding himself fully as Cerberus pressed against him. The struggle that followed carried no fury. It unfolded as pressure meeting resistance, each adjusting incrementally. Cerberus yielded when permission aligned, not because he was overcome, but because the condition had been met. Authority, mortality, and purpose intersected in precise balance. Heracles did not pass through by force. He passed through by fulfillment of requirement. The gate reopened behind him once his task was complete. Cerberus resumed his place immediately, posture settling back into stillness. The boundary reasserted itself without disruption. The underworld remained intact. Later came Orpheus. His approach carried no strength at all. Cerberus sensed him long before he arrived, not through weight, but through sound. Music drifted ahead of him, low and steady, moving through stone and air with unusual clarity. It did not command, it invited. Cerberus responded differently. Heads lowered slightly. Attention softened. The serpents relaxed their coils, following the vibration rather than resisting it. The music did not disrupt the boundary. It aligned with it, echoing the stillness the underworld required. Orpheus passed without struggle. Cerberus did not move to block him. He did not need to. The music carried understanding rather than intrusion. It acknowledged the gate rather than attempting to bypass it. When Orpheus left, the sound faded gently. Cerberus returned to full vigilance without delay. These moments remained rare. They did not weaken the boundary. They reinforced it. Each exception confirmed that passage required alignment rather than desire, preparation rather than impulse. Cerberus remembered them without attachment. They did not linger in his awareness longer than necessary. His role did not change. The gate held. The living continued to approach rarely. Most turned back. A few were assessed. Fewer still passed. And through it all, Cerberus remained exactly where he belonged, enforcing balance without hesitation or regret. Cerberus understood mercy without learning it. It did not arrive as softness or hesitation. It existed as accuracy. Each response matched what stood before him, nothing more and nothing less. This precision allowed the boundary to remain firm without becoming cruel. He did not punish those who turned back. The underworld itself encouraged retreat through weight and stillness. Cerberus allowed this process to unfold naturally. When footsteps slowed and stopped, when breath deepened and resolve thinned, he remained still, offering no pursuit. Turning back restored balance without conflict. Those who reached the gate fully were treated with clarity. Cerberus did not grow louder or more imposing unless needed. His presence alone carried enough certainty to communicate consequence. The living who sensed this often halted on their own, recognizing the limit without needing explanation. This restraint mattered. Fear can provoke resistance. Calm closes paths quietly. Cerberus embodied the latter. He did not escalate situations. He resolved them. The dead received no judgment at all. They passed through without recognition or delay. Cerberus did not look at them as individuals. Their arrival marked completion. They belonged, and belonging required no scrutiny. This separation kept the underworld stable. Souls moved inward smoothly. The gate never clogged with uncertainty. Time flowed evenly, unbroken by disorder or repeated conflict. Cerberus remained unchanged by centuries of repetition. Routine did not dull his awareness. Each approach carried its own texture, its own signals. He responded freshly each time, not through curiosity, but through commitment. Mercy showed itself in what he did not do. He did not chase. He did not torment. He did not escalate without cause. The boundary held because it did not provoke what it could avoid. Even the gods respected this balance. Those who passed through the gate understood the conditions implicitly. They did not interfere with Cerberus's judgment. His authority came from alignment with purpose rather than hierarchy. The underworld relied on this consistency. Paths remained clear. Order endured. The gate stayed quiet. Its presence felt more than seen. Cerberus rested in this stillness. He did not seek recognition. He did not anticipate change. His role remained complete as long as the boundary remained necessary. And so, he waited. Not for challenge, but for continuity. Time behaved differently at the gate. It did not pass in measured units or visible change. It did not erode or accumulate. It settled. Moments layered themselves gently, each one resting atop the last without pressure or urgency. Cerberus experienced this not as endlessness, but as continuity. Nothing decayed. Stone worn smooth by centuries of passage remained stable. The air held a constant weight, neither stale nor fresh. Sound traveled slowly, softening before it could echo. Even shadows behaved predictably, never stretching too far or collapsing entirely. Cerberus existed comfortably within this rhythm. He did not count time. He recognized sequence through pattern rather than duration. Each arrival, each retreat, each passing soul became part of a repeating structure that never demanded novelty to remain complete. Stillness renewed him. Where other beings required rest through sleep, Cerberus rested through constancy. Holding position restored his strength. Awareness sharpened through repetition rather than fatigue. The gate itself fed his endurance, anchoring him as securely as stone anchored the walls around him. This environment preserved clarity. No seasons passed at the threshold. No light shifted dramatically enough to signal age. Cerberus remained unchanged, not because time ignored him, but because time moved differently where boundaries mattered most. The underworld benefited from this suspension. Souls did not rush. They did not linger. Movement carried direction without urgency. Each path extended forward smoothly, uninterrupted by cycles of growth or decay. Cerberus felt none of the strain associated with eternity. There was no anticipation, no impatience, no longing for variation. Purpose filled the space where desire might have lived. Occasionally, the gate stood empty for long stretches. Cerberus did not experience these moments as absence. The lack of movement simply reinforced readiness. Awareness remained outward, steady and complete, waiting without expectation. Then presence returned. A soul arrived. A living figure approached and turned back. A god passed without disturbance. Each interaction reaffirmed the boundary's function, strengthening rather than draining his resolve. Time folded around this role. Eternity became manageable because it was structured. Continuity replaced novelty. Meaning replaced change. Cerberus did not endure eternity. He inhabited it. The underworld adjusted itself to Cerberus. It did not expand outward or rearrange suddenly. It settled inward, shaping its paths, pauses, and distances around a guardian who never shifted position. The gate became the fixed point from which everything else took measure. Roads curved gently toward it. They did not funnel or rush. They guided. Souls arriving from many directions found themselves moving along routes that gradually narrowed, easing motion into stillness. By the time they reached the threshold, effort had already drained away, replaced by acceptance. This was intentional. The underworld learned that resistance created friction. Friction created disorder. Cerberus's presence allowed movement to soften before contact was ever made. Spaces near the gate remained wide and uncluttered. Nothing crowded the threshold. No structures pressed close. The air stayed clear, heavy but calm. The absence of congestion reinforced the certainty that passage followed order, not urgency. Cerberus influenced this without action. His stillness became instruction. The realm mirrored his restraint. Noise faded quickly. Light dimmed evenly. Motion slowed without stopping entirely. Even the rivers responded. Their flow steadied near the gate, losing turbulence. Currents smoothed, guiding souls without pulling or resisting. The boundary between movement and rest became seamless rather than abrupt. The underworld found balance here. It did not rely on punishment to enforce order. It relied on structure. Cerberus embodied this principle so completely that the realm followed naturally. Those who belonged passed through with ease. Those who did not turned away early. The gate remained quiet because it did not need to announce itself. Cerberus remained unaware of this influence in any conscious way. He did not observe change or take satisfaction in it. The alignment occurred simply because the boundary required stability, and stability invites order. Over time, the underworld felt complete, not static, not rigid, held. Cerberus stood at the center of this equilibrium, unmoving, attentive, and sufficient. His presence allowed the realm to function without excess, maintaining separation without cruelty. The gate existed as certainty rather than obstacle, and Cerberus remained exactly where he was meant to be. Cerberus was always aware of the living world, not through longing and not through memory, but through contrast. The boundary allowed sensation to pass one way: warmth, vibration, breath, enough to distinguish life from stillness without inviting attachment. He sensed it constantly. Footsteps approached with irregular rhythm. Heartbeats carried urgency. Breath came shallow or fast, filled with effort. These signals arrived before form or sound, reaching Cerberus as texture rather than image. The living world felt unstable. Movement surged and receded without pattern. Emotion pushed bodies forward, then pulled them back again. Desire shifted direction unpredictably. Cerberus registered all of this without judgment, recognizing it as the nature of what existed beyond the gate. He did not envy it. Change did not appeal to him. Variation offered no advantage. The living world required constant correction, endless adjustment. His role existed precisely because such motion needed containment. Occasionally, the contrast sharpened. A living soul approached with grief so heavy it dragged at the boundary itself. Another came with ambition that refused to slow. Cerberus felt these clearly, yet they did not disturb his focus. He allowed the underworld's weight to respond naturally, thinning resolve without confrontation. The living always turned back eventually. Cerberus did not feel satisfaction in this. The retreat simply restored alignment. The boundary held, and equilibrium returned. He never wondered what lay beyond. Curiosity requires absence. Cerberus lacked nothing. His awareness filled the space entirely, leaving no room for desire to form. The gate provided purpose, structure, and clarity. Everything needed to sustain attention indefinitely. Even the rare figures who passed with permission did not awaken interest. Their movement beyond the gate did not create curiosity. It confirmed condition. They belonged temporarily, then they did not. Cerberus adjusted accordingly, without residue. The living world remained present without invitation. Cerberus sensed seasons through temperature shifts, storms through pressure changes, war through vibration carried deep into the ground. Life continued endlessly above, restless and loud, yet always held at the proper distance. He did not resent this separation. Distance preserved balance. His existence made the boundary reliable, allowing life and death to remain distinct without constant struggle. Cerberus remained facing outward, not watching with desire, not guarding with hostility, simply present, ensuring that the worlds on either side of him could continue as they were meant to, separate, stable, and complete. Cerberus did not age, not in the way living creatures measure time. His body did not weaken. His senses did not dull. What he guarded remained the same, and so did he. Change requires contrast, and at the gate, contrast rarely lasted long enough to take hold. This constancy shaped his strength. Rather than relying on bursts of force, Cerberus relied on reliability. The gate never tested him through surprise. It tested him through repetition. Each approach, each pause, each retreat reaffirmed the pattern he enforced. Strength accumulated through certainty rather than exertion. The underworld responded by remaining stable. Paths did not drift. Boundaries did not blur. Souls continued inward without hesitation. The rare living presence dissolved back toward the surface long before conflict became necessary. Cerberus stood through all of it. He did not anticipate disruption. He did not brace for novelty. His awareness remained evenly distributed, never narrowing, never scattering. Stillness preserved attention better than vigilance alone ever could. Centuries layered gently. The stone beneath his paws wore smooth. The air remained heavy and calm. The space around the gate carried the same quiet density it always had. Cerberus felt this continuity as reinforcement rather than stagnation. Occasional events tested alignment. A hero arrived bearing purpose. A song carried clarity through the dark. A god crossed the threshold without sound. Each occurrence resolved cleanly, leaving no residue behind. Cerberus returned immediately to stillness. No memory lingered longer than necessary. Reflection did not distract him. His role did not expand or diminish through experience. It remained complete. This steadiness made him indispensable. A boundary guarded through emotion would eventually fractured. A boundary guarded through habit would erode. Cerberus guarded through identity. He existed as the boundary rather than standing in front of it. The underworld trusted this completely. No adjustment was needed, no replacement considered. The gate held because its guardian required nothing beyond what already existed. Cerberus endured by remaining exactly as he was, and that endurance proved stronger than any act of force. Cerberus never left the gate. There was no moment when his duty concluded, no signal that his presence had become unnecessary. The boundary he guarded did not evolve past the need for certainty. As long as life moved forward and death remained final, the threshold required attention. This completeness defined his story. Cerberus was not meant to change, overcome, or be released. His purpose was fulfillment rather than transformation. The absence of an ending did not weaken his meaning. It perfected it. The underworld continued to function because of this constancy. Souls arrived, passed, and moved onward without confusion. The living world remained intact above, free to churn and change without spilling downward unchecked. The separation held cleanly, quietly, without spectacle. Cerberus remained aware, not watchful in anticipation, not tense with expectation, simply present. His three heads continued their shared attention. His body held firm against stone, worn smooth by centuries of passage. The serpents around his neck shifted occasionally, responding to subtle changes in air and intent. Nothing demanded more. No final challenge arrived to test his strength. No erosion weakened his resolve. His role existed outside of escalation. It required maintenance rather than climax. Time passed, and Cerberus passed with it, unchanged. The world learned to trust this permanence. Boundaries shaped behavior. Certainty replaced fear. The gate became less a barrier and more a fact, something acknowledged without argument. Cerberus did not need remembrance through story. He remained present in function rather than memory. His work continued whether spoken of or not. The underworld stayed ordered. The living world stayed above. Balance endured. And so, Cerberus stood, not as a monster, not as a symbol, but as a solution that never failed, guarding the space between worlds with calm that did not waver. The gate held, and that was enough. The first sign came as a tremor that lasted too long. It began as a thin vibration underfoot, barely enough to disturb a cup of water. Then it thickened, rolling outward through the ground in slow pulses. Hills shivered. Loose stones hopped and settled again. Birds lifted from trees in sudden waves, leaving whole slopes briefly empty. The air changed with it. A metallic taste gathered at the back of the throat. Wind turned restless, shifting direction in short, indecisive cuts. Along coastlines, the sea drew back a little farther than expected, then returned with a heavier slap against rock, as if the water itself felt hurried. Deep beneath the land, something moved. It felt like pressure gathering in a sealed place, like a lid bowing upward from below. Cracks crept along dry ground in thin, branching lines. Springs clouded. Hot breath rose from fissures and carried the smell of scorched mineral. People looked to the sky first. They expected storm. They expected thunder. They expected the familiar anger of weather. What arrived came from the opposite direction. The ground split. Stone tore with a sound that carried across valleys, a long, ripping groan that rose into a sharp, grinding snap. A seam opened across the earth like a wound, and heat poured out as though the world had been holding its breath for centuries. From the opening, darkness lifted. It moved upward in coils, dense with ash and grit, turning daylight dull and reddish. The cloud carried sparks that drifted lazily, each one floating for a moment before vanishing. The air grew heavy, and each inhale felt warmer than it should. Then the shape rose behind the smoke. First came the outline, massive, vertical, filling the space above the broken land the way a mountain fills a horizon. The figure did not rise quickly. It unfolded, taking its time, as if standing up from a long sleep. A head emerged through the ash, then another, then more. Necks lifted in a spreading crown, each one moving with its own rhythm. Some heads turned toward distant seas, others angled toward the high places where temples stood. A few faced downward, watching the ground with the calm attention of something that already understood how fragile it was. Wings opened. They spread wide enough to steal light from the slopes below, membranes catching the dim sun and turning it into shadowed color. As the wings flexed, wind surged outward in a broad, physical wave that bent trees and flattened grasses in a single, sweeping motion. The body followed. It carried the thickness of a storm front and the weight of a cliff. Scales flashed through the ash in brief glints, like wet stone reflecting firelight. Along the creature's lower half, coils shifted and tightened, grinding rock into dust beneath their pressure. The world reacted instinctively. Animals fled. Birds scattered into the thinning edge of the sky. Even the sea pulled into itself, waves gathering and stacking as if preparing for impact. Above, the gods felt the change immediately. This kind of rising carried a signature, ancient, deliberate, aimed. It carried the heat of old wars and the patience of something that had waited long enough to become certain. Typhon had entered the world, and with his first breath, wind learned a new voice. Typhon did not rise by accident. His existence traced back to an older tension, one that had never fully cooled beneath the surface of the world. Long before the ground split, before smoke climbed upward, the earth itself carried a memory of conflict that had been pressed down rather than resolved. That memory belonged to Gaia. She had endured through every age of upheaval. She had given shape to titans, watched them fall, and felt their weight driven deep beneath her surface. Victory had brought order, yet it had also sealed something unfinished into the foundations of the world. When Zeus rose to rule, balance shifted sharply. Thunder replaced raw strength. Sky asserted itself over stone. Power centralized, and the world quieted under law rather than force. Gaia felt the stillness settle. It came with pressure. Mountains locked into place. Seas held their boundaries. Fire followed pattern rather than impulse. Order pressed downward, compacting what had once moved freely. The titans lay beneath it all. They remained alive, aware and restrained, held within Tartarus, where light rarely reached and time felt thick. Their presence continued to warm the stone around them, a low, constant heat that never fully dispersed. Gaia endured this for a long while. She had accepted cycles before. She understood replacement and succession. What she resisted was erasure. The Titans had shaped the world through motion and mass. Their confinement left a hollow pressure, a sense that strength had been sealed away without understanding. That pressure gathered. It moved slowly, threading upward through layers of stone, through magma and fault lines, through places where the world already felt unstable. The earth began to respond internally, shifting in small ways long before anything reached the surface. Gaia decided. She would create something that carried the force of the old age without repeating its mistakes. Something that moved, adapted, and rose where the Titans had been pinned. Something shaped to confront the sky directly. Typhon formed in stages. Heat collected first, dense and restless. Then mass followed, compacting into something that could hold shape without shattering. Limbs assembled themselves gradually, responding to pressure and space. Heads formed last, multiple and alert, each one capable of independent attention. Storms gathered around the process. Wind coiled downward into the forming body. Lightning traced paths along the rising mass, feeding it energy rather than breaking it apart. Sound followed, a deep, rolling resonance that never fully reached the surface, yet rattled distant stone. Typhon's wings grew broad and powerful, capable of lifting air itself into motion. His coils formed thick and muscular, shaped to anchor and constrict. His many heads learned the rhythm of breath before ever tasting open air. This was intention made physical. Gaia shaped him with care rather than haste. She bound his form to the forces already present in the world: fire, wind, stone, pressure. Nothing about him relied on novelty. He embodied what had always existed beneath order, waiting. When the shaping finished, Gaia released her hold. The earth responded immediately. Faults shifted. Magma surged. The seal that had held tension in place gave way. What had been prepared now demanded movement. Typhon rose. His emergence carried purpose rather than surprise. He came upward to challenge, to test, to press against the sky that had sealed so much beneath it. His existence asked a single question the world had postponed for generations. Could order hold against force that had learned to endure? The answer would arrive quickly. The sky felt it before it saw him. Air thickened high above the mountains, growing heavy and uneven, as if weight had been added where none belonged. Clouds gathered without pattern, stacking into dark layers that refused to break into storm. Lightning flickered inside them and went nowhere, trapped and restless. On Olympus, attention sharpened. The gods sensed disturbance, not as sound or sight, but as pressure. A resistance pushing upward against the order Zeus had laid across the world. The balance he maintained through law and distance strained, vibrating like a held breath. Then Typhon's shadow reached them. It spread across the land in slow motion, climbing slopes and crossing valleys without regard for scale. The sun dimmed as his wings cut through the light, and the sky lost its depth, flattened beneath the breadth of his form. Silence followed. Not calm, but pause. The moment before weather breaks. The gods saw him clearly then, heads lifted in every direction, each one alive with awareness. coils shifted with the weight of mountains. Wings flexed once, stirring winds that tore across the high places and sent clouds racing outward. Heat shimmered along his body, bending the air into waves. Recognition moved quickly. This was not a creature to be scattered or redirected. Typhon carried the density of the earth itself, shaped into motion. He did not rush. He advanced steadily, closing distance without urgency. Reaction fractured. Some gods stepped back instinctively, retreating toward the edges of the sky where distance still offered comfort. Others reached for familiar power, gathering it quickly, uncertain whether speed or force mattered more. Order faltered. For the first time since the Titans had been bound, Olympus felt exposed. When Typhon roared, the sound did not travel outward. It dropped. The roar pressed downward through air and stone, driving itself into the land with such force that mountains cracked and valleys widened. The sea responded instantly, waves stacking into towering walls before collapsing inward again. The world shook in recognition. Zeus moved forward. Thunder gathered around him, dense and bright, lighting the clouds from within. He raised his hand, and lightning leapt outward in a wide arc, striking Typhon's body with explosive force. The air tore apart with the sound, and light filled the sky. Typhon absorbed it. The strike scorched scales and split stone beneath him, yet his advance did not slow. Heads turned toward the source, eyes bright and focused. Wind surged outward from his wings, tearing lightning apart before it could gather again. The confrontation was unavoidable now. Force had met something built to endure it. Olympus watched as the sky filled with fire and wind, as thunder rolled without rhythm, and as the ground below began to buckle under the weight of what had been released. The age of order had been challenged openly, and the gods understood, in that moment of clarity, that this struggle would not resolve quickly, nor cleanly. The clash did not stay in one place. When Zeus struck again, the sky fractured into motion. Thunder rolled outward in overlapping waves, each one tearing across the land with enough force to shatter stone. Lightning fell in rapid succession, branching wildly, striking mountains, seas, and the vast body rising to meet it. Typhon advanced through it. His wings beat once, then again, each movement driving walls of wind outward that flattened forests and peeled soil from hillsides. Storms formed around him rather than above him, rotating tightly, fed by the heat rolling off his body. Rain fell sideways, driven by pressure instead of gravity. The ground broke open. Fault lines widened beneath the weight of the conflict. Entire ridges collapsed into themselves. Fire spilled upward through cracks in the earth, glowing red and white before hardening into new stone as air cooled it. Zeus closed the distance. He moved through the storm with precision, shaping lightning into focused strikes rather than scattered force. Each bolt landed with intention, aimed to disrupt movement, to break rhythm, to slow advance. Typhon responded immediately. Coils surged forward, slamming into the land with crushing weight. Stone buckled and folded. One head snapped outward, then another, then several at once, each breath carrying heat and ash that scorched the air itself. The sky lost its shape. Clouds shredded under the pressure. Wind roared without direction. Light flashed constantly, yet illumination never fully settled. The world existed in fragments: brightness, shadow, motion, impact. The gods withdrew. Those who had stepped forward moments earlier now scattered, retreating beyond the edges of the storm. Power gathered in smaller pockets, held back rather than spent. Distance replaced confidence. Zeus remained. He gathered everything he could reach: wind, fire, sound, compressing it into a single strike. The air screamed as lightning condensed into a blinding column, tearing straight downward into Typhon's center with a force that split the earth beneath them. The impact drove Typhon back. For the first time, his advance slowed. Stone collapsed beneath his coils. One wing folded under the force, grinding into the land as the creature shifted its weight to remain upright. The pause lasted only a moment. Typhon rose again, heads lifting in unison, eyes fixed forward. Heat surged outward, thick enough to warp the air into visible distortion. Storms bent toward him, feeding rather than resisting his presence. The world itself struggled to contain the scale. Mountains fractured into ranges. Seas surged inland, then recoiled violently. The boundaries that defined land and sky blurred, reshaped by pressure rather than design. The battle carved permanence. Every strike left a mark that did not fade. Valleys deepened, peaks sharpened, winds learned new paths. The world began recording the conflict into its structure, layer by layer. Zeus recognized the shift. This was no longer a contest of endurance. The longer it continued, the more the world itself would fracture beyond recovery. Force alone would not bring resolution. The battle reached a breaking point, not through victory, but through realization. The shift began quietly. Amid the noise and fracture, Zeus stopped pressing forward. Thunder gathered around him without release, coiled tightly instead of thrown. The storm around Olympus hesitated, its motion tightening into smaller, denser rotations. The realization settled fully. Typhon could be driven back, slowed, wounded, yet never removed through impact alone. Each strike reshaped the world more than it weakened the creature. Every exchange deepened the scars, spreading outward across land and sea. The solution required a different scale of thinking. Zeus withdrew upward, gaining distance rather than ground. From above, the pattern clarified. Typhon remained bound to the earth by his own mass. His strength came from contact, from pressure, heat, and depth. Severing that connection would not end him. Burying it might. The storm reorganized. Clouds compressed into a single, towering mass. Lightning stopped branching and began stacking, strike upon strike, each one falling in the same place with accumulating force. The sky focused itself. Typhon advanced again. He surged forward, coils grinding the land into powder. Heads rose high, breath scorching air into rolling distortion. Wings beat harder, drawing storms inward, feeding on their energy. Zeus waited. When the strike came, it fell differently. Lightning drove downward with sustained pressure rather than explosive release, hammering the same point again and again. The ground beneath Typhon softened under heat and vibration, stone loosening into something closer to flow than structure. The earth opened willingly, not as a wound, but as an answer. The land beneath Typhon began to give way, sinking gradually under his own weight. Coils pressed downward, heat poured inward. Each movement drove him deeper into the yielding ground. Typhon resisted instinctively. Wings strained upward. Heads pulled against the drag. The effort slowed the descent, but could not reverse it. The deeper he pressed, the more the earth responded, closing around him with deliberate weight. Zeus maintained the pressure. The storm held steady, locking the descent into place. Lightning sealed the edges of the opening, hardening stone even as deeper layers softened beneath the heat. The world cooperated. Mountains nearby shifted, sliding inward. Ridges leaned and folded. Stone flowed downward, guided by gravity and force, into a forming chamber vast enough to contain what could not be destroyed. Typhon sank. His upper form disappeared gradually, swallowed by layers of earth that pressed tighter with depth. Wings vanished first, then heads, then coils, until only heat and vibration remained at the surface. When the ground closed fully, silence followed. The storm thinned. Clouds loosened. Wind slowed to its ordinary rhythm. The land settled around the sealed pressure beneath it, locking the containment into place. Typhon remained alive, contained, compressed, bound beneath weight he could not displace quickly enough to rise again. His heat continued to move through the stone above him, warming it, softening it, reminding the world of what lay below. Zeus withdrew. Order returned in altered form. The sky reclaimed its distance. The earth held its burden. The conflict ended without triumph, resolved through restraint rather than elimination. The world had learned something essential. Some forces endure best when pressed downward, shaped into stillness rather than scattered through struggle. Containment did not bring quiet. When the land closed over Typhon, it did not seal him away into silence. Pressure remained. Heat continued to rise. The earth above his prison warmed slowly, unevenly, as though breath still moved through it from below. The surface responded first. In places where stone thinned, heat escaped. Ground swelled and cracked. New mountains formed abruptly, lifted by pressure that refused to disperse. Their slopes remained unstable, shedding rock and ash long after their shape settled. Fire appeared where it had not existed before, emerging through narrow channels and hardening into fresh stone when air met heat. Storms followed the same pattern. They gathered suddenly, without the usual signs of change. Winds twisted sharply, driven upward from beneath rather than pulled across the surface. Lightning struck repeatedly in the same regions, as though drawn to something persistent below. People noticed the consistency. These were not wandering storms. They returned to the same places, again and again. The land above Typhon's resting place grew known for unrest, shaking ground, sudden fire, violent weather that rose without warning and left just as abruptly. The gods understood the cause. Typhon remained alive beneath the earth, compressed rather than extinguished. His movement was limited, yet his presence continued to influence the world above him. Each surge of heat, each burst of wind, marked an attempt to shift, to expand, to test the boundaries of his containment. The world adjusted around this reality. Settlements avoided the most unstable regions. Routes shifted. The land incorporated unrest into its rhythm, building expectation around patterns that repeated reliably. What had once felt like chaos settled into something closer to routine. Typhon endured in this form. His awareness persisted, stretched thin across weight and pressure. Movement became effort without release. Each attempt to rise translated into surface change rather than escape. The earth answered him with resistance shaped by gravity and time. The gods allowed this to continue. No further correction followed. The balance held as long as pressure remained contained. Storms could be weathered. Fire could be avoided. The alternative, release, remained unthinkable. Typhon became part of the world's structure, not visible, not silent, present in motion rather than form. The land carried him as it carried memory, embedding his force into the rhythms of heat, wind, and upheaval that never fully disappeared. The silence after Typhon's burial was not relief. It was awareness. The gods felt the difference immediately, not as danger, but as weight. Order still held, yet it no longer felt effortless. The sky remained dominant, but its rule now depended on maintenance rather than assumption. Zeus understood this first. Victory had not come from superiority alone. It had required restraint, patience, and a willingness to stop striking. Typhon had forced a realization that thunder could enforce balance, but not guarantee permanence. Power needed structure to endure. This altered how rule was carried. Decisions slowed. Boundaries hardened. Olympus shifted from reaction to vigilance. The gods watched more closely for pressure building beneath the surface, not only in the land, but in alliances, ambitions, and long-standing grievances. Distance became deliberate. The age of direct confrontation faded. When imbalance surfaced, it was redirected, contained, or reshaped rather than crushed. The lesson Typhon imposed settled deeply. Force invites resistance of equal scale. The memory of flight lingered. Some gods never forgot the moment they withdrew, when the storm rose too large to confront cleanly. That memory softened certainty. It introduced caution where arrogance once stood. Even the sky learned limits. Storms followed paths now, repeating patterns instead of roaming freely. Lightning struck familiar ranges. Wind learned channels shaped by mountains raised during the conflict. The world's scars guided the gods as much as their will did. Typhon's presence made vigilance permanent. His continued unrest beneath the earth acted as reminder rather than threat. Each eruption, each violent storm, reinforced the cost of neglect. The balance required attention, not dominance. The gods adapted. They remained powerful, yet more measured. Authority carried responsibility alongside command. The world responded more smoothly when power moved with intention instead of excess. Typhon did not need to rise again. His impact remained active, shaping divine behavior long after his form disappeared beneath stone. The sky held its place. The earth carried its burden. And the world continued forward, shaped by the knowledge that even gods must choose restraint to keep order intact. The world did not forget what had been pressed into it. Long after the storms thinned and the sky reclaimed its distance, the land continued to speak in Typhon's language. Mountains formed where none had stood before, their slopes sharp and unsettled, as if lifted too quickly to find balance. Valleys deepened along old fault lines, shaped by pressure that had nowhere else to go. Fire found new paths. In places where the earth thinned, heat escaped steadily rather than violently. Smoke rose from vents that never fully closed. Stone flowed once, cooled and hardened into dark fields that held warmth long after sunset. The ground there felt alive underfoot, humming faintly with stored force. People learned to recognize these signs. They avoided certain ridges. They learned which winds preceded sudden change. They marked regions where storms gathered without warning and passed just as quickly. Knowledge replaced fear, turning unrest into something expected rather than overwhelming. Typhon's presence became geographic. He no longer existed as a shape or a threat that could be named directly. He existed as tendency, where weather gathered, where fire emerged, where the earth refused stillness. The land itself carried him forward through repetition. Stories followed the terrain. Travelers spoke of regions where the sky seemed closer, where thunder lingered too long in the air. Farmers noted soil that warmed too early in the year. Sailors avoided coastlines where wind bent sharply inward without clear cause. The world adjusted without ceremony. Settlements shifted. Roads curved. Trade routes favored stability over speed. The marks left by the conflict shaped daily decisions, quietly influencing where people lived and how they moved. Typhon endured through these patterns. His unrest expressed itself through motion rather than escape. Each surge of pressure translated into surface change, reminding the world of the force held beneath it. The containment held, not through silence, but through redistribution. The land accepted this role. It carried weight. It released pressure. It adapted. What had once threatened collapse now settled into rhythm. The world did not heal by erasing damage. It healed by incorporating it. Typhon remained where he had been placed, not gone, not quiet, intimate. disintegrated. Typhon never returned to the sky. There was no second rising, no renewed challenge that demanded spectacle. What remained instead was pressure held in place, a force compressed into stillness, shaping the world indirectly rather than through open conflict. This was enough. The earth learned how to carry what it could not remove. Weight distributed itself through stone and heat. Movement redirected into wind, fire, and shifting ground. What once threatened collapse settled into pattern. People adapted first. They built away from unstable slopes. They learned the timing of sudden storms. They understood which lands demanded respect and which offered calm. Knowledge passed quietly from generation to generation, shaped by observation rather than fear. The gods adapted too. Power remained vast, yet no longer careless. Authority held structure. Balance required attention. The memory of Typhon lingered as a reminder that containment often protects more than conquest. Typhon endured beneath it all. His presence never faded completely. It pressed upward gently, reminding the world that force does not vanish when buried. It changes expression. Storms gathered. Mountains stood restless. Fire breathed through cracks in the land. The world accepted this, not as threat, but as condition. Typhon's story did not need retelling through repetition. It remained written into geography, weather, and habit. Anyone who listened closely could still hear it, in the roll of distant thunder, in the warmth rising from stone long after nightfall. He stayed buried. The sky held its distance. The earth bore its weight, and the balance endured, not through victory, but through restraint. Before Scylla became something sailors avoided, she belonged to the shoreline. She lived where land met water gently, in a stretch of coast shaped by clear currents and predictable tides. The sea there behaved with consistency. Waves arrived evenly. Wind followed familiar patterns. Fishermen worked close to shore, returning before dusk with little fear of sudden change. Scylla knew this place intimately. She moved easily along the rocks, barefoot and sure-footed, aware of every ledge and hollow, shaped by years of tide and salt. The water responded to her presence. Fish gathered nearby. Small creatures lingered in shallows where her shadow passed. The coast felt inhabited rather than claimed. Her life held rhythm. Mornings followed the tide. Afternoons passed in stillness. Evenings brought sound. Water against stone. Wind moving through low growth along the cliffs. Nothing demanded urgency. Nothing pressed her toward excess. Her presence drew attention quietly. Travelers noticed her from passing boats. Fishermen spoke of a figure along the rocks who moved with ease and certainty. Her voice carried clearly over water, not in song, but in ordinary speech, shaped by calm and familiarity. People felt at ease hearing it. The gods noticed too. The shoreline lay under the influence of Poseidon, whose attention rarely settled in one place for long. When it did, the focus often followed beauty, movement, and ease within his domain. Scylla's presence aligned naturally with the coast he shaped. His visits altered the air. Water stirred more actively when he arrived. Wind shifted direction. The sea deepened in color, reflecting a weight beneath its surface. Scylla sensed these changes before she understood them, feeling the rhythm of the coast respond to something older and broader than herself. She did not resist. Their connection formed without urgency, shaped by proximity and familiarity rather than command. Time passed without disruption. The shoreline continued its steady cycle. Life remained contained within its boundaries. Elsewhere, attention gathered. Far from the coast, another figure observed the pattern taking shape. Circe lived surrounded by knowledge accumulated through isolation. Her awareness extended beyond her island, carried by instinct sharpened through solitude and study. She noticed what was shifting. Possession had never been her language. Control interested her less than influence. When something unsettled her, she addressed it indirectly, allowing intention to take form through preparation rather than confrontation. Scylla's life continued uninterrupted. She remained unaware of the forces aligning around her, of the attention narrowing, of how quickly balance could tip when emotion entered where rhythm once held. The coast stayed calm, for now. Awareness shifted quietly, far from the shoreline. Circe watched the pattern settle into place long before it disturbed her sleep. She understood attention as a current, something that gathered strength as it lingered. When Poseidon's focus returned to the same stretch of coast again and again, it carried meaning. Familiarity had begun to shape preference. Circe did not respond with haste. Her nature favored preparation over impulse. She studied what unfolded, tracing cause and movement the way others followed tides. Scylla's presence along the coast remained unchanged, steady and unguarded. That steadiness drew the sea's attention naturally, without intent or ambition. The imbalance formed elsewhere. Jealousy took shape as calculation. Circe considered how influence might be redirected without confrontation. Direct appeal held little interest. Force would invite resistance. A subtler correction promised permanence. She turned to knowledge. Her island held more than herbs and charms. It carried methods refined through time, practices that reshaped form rather than erased it. Transformation offered a solution that preserved life while altering function. It allowed consequence to settle without spectacle. The plan required proximity. Circe traveled toward the coast under the guise of curiosity, her arrival blending into the rhythm of passing visitors and changing tides. She observed Scylla closely, noting ease of movement, familiarity with stone and water, the quiet confidence that came from belonging to a place. Opportunity emerged naturally. One day, when Scylla stepped away from the rocks to bathe in a sheltered inlet, Circe acted. The water there appeared unchanged, clear, inviting, familiar. The surface held no sign of preparation. Knowledge rested beneath it, already active. The transformation began instantly. The sea tightened around Scylla's body, drawing her downward as pain surged without warning. Her limbs lost coordination as sensation fractured. Form responded to influence she could not see or resist. Where one body had moved freely, many began to press outward. Change settled into permanence. Multiple necks emerged along her sides, each ending in a snapping head driven by hunger rather than intention. Her lower form fused with the cliff itself, anchoring her to stone. Balance vanished, replaced by fixation. Movement narrowed into a single axis, outward, toward the water passing endlessly before her. Awareness remained intact. Scylla understood what had happened even as her body finished reshaping. Memory persisted. Thought remained clear. What changed was expression. Her voice broke apart, emerging as cries that carried across the water without forming words. Circe watched briefly. The outcome matched intention. Possession shifted, attention redirected. The shoreline's calm fractured into danger. With the balance corrected in her mind, Circe withdrew, leaving the result to settle into its environment. The coast absorbed the change slowly. Waves adjusted their break around the altered rock. Currents bent slightly inward. Fish avoided the shallows where Scylla's new form held. The shoreline gained an edge it had never carried before. Scylla remained bound. Her life continued, altered and confined, shaped by a decision made elsewhere. Hunger replaced rhythm. Waiting replaced movement. The sea became both boundary and audience. Sailors would learn her name soon enough. But first, Scylla learned what it meant to exist without escape. The change announced itself through absence. Ships that once passed the narrow channel without concern began failing to arrive at their destinations. Crews vanished along a route considered dependable, a stretch of water known more for its predictability than danger. At first, the losses felt scattered, easy to attribute to weather or error. Patterns emerged quickly. The channel between cliffs forced vessels inward, narrowing choice and amplifying consequence. Currents accelerated there, drawing ships close to the rock face where Scylla now held her place. Oars strained. Sails lost flexibility. Steering demanded precision at the very moment when control mattered most. Scylla learned through repetition. Movement above water sent vibrations through the stone, anchoring her body. Shadows crossed the surface. The sound of hull against current arrived before sight. Hunger followed instinctively, rising without deliberation. Her strike came fast. Multiple heads lunged outward in coordinated arcs, each targeting a different point along the ship's edge. Sailors vanished from decks in moments, pulled upward and inward before alarms fully formed. The attack ended as quickly as it began. What remained drifted onward, damaged but intact enough to continue. This pattern repeated. Scylla did not pursue ships. She remained fixed, allowing the channel to deliver them into reach. The sea did the work of approach. The cliff provided leverage. Hunger directed motion. Survivors spoke of sudden loss. They described the absence of warning, the speed of the strike, the impossibility of response. Many never saw Scylla fully. They remembered movement, sound, and the sense that something had reached out from the rock itself. Fear followed information. Sailors altered routes when possible, choosing longer journeys over narrower ones. Trade slowed. Traffic concentrated elsewhere. Still, necessity drew some ships through the channel, pressed by time, cargo, or confidence. Scylla remained constant. Her presence carved a reputation into the sea lanes. The channel gained a name spoken carefully in harbors. Maps marked it distinctly. Captains planned approaches with dread rather than routine. Across the water, another force stirred. The strait narrowed further by the presence of Charybdis, whose influence gathered on the opposite side of the passage. Water there twisted inward, pulled into a relentless spiral. The sea itself sank downward, consuming ships whole when drawn too close. Between them, choice tightened. Sailors faced a passage where danger pressed from both sides, one offering sudden loss, the other complete destruction. The channel allowed no neutral route. Movement required acceptance of consequence. Scylla and Charybdis shaped the space together. One punished proximity, the other punished hesitation. The sea carried both without preference. Ships that entered the strait sailed between hunger and collapse, forced to weigh loss against annihilation. Some passed with damage, some disappeared entirely. The channel earned its place among the most feared routes in the world. Scylla watched. Bound to stone, she learned the rhythm of traffic and tide, responding without intention beyond survival. Her existence settled fully into function. The sea no longer offered her escape. It delivered sustenance instead. Some passages demanded acceptance rather than avoidance. When Odysseus reached the edge of the strait, he understood immediately that delay would solve nothing. The sea narrowed ahead. Wind funneled through the cliffs. The water accelerated, tugging the ship toward the center, where control thinned with every stroke. He assessed the space carefully. To one side, Scylla's cliff rose sharply from the water, its face jagged and close. Shadows moved along its edge with unsettling regularity. To the other, the sea itself collapsed inward, drawn into the vast pull of Charybdis, whose presence transformed water into descent. The strait allowed no clean path. Odysseus weighed outcome rather than hope. Steering too far from the cliff risked total loss. Drawing closer meant sacrifice measured rather than absolute. The decision formed quickly, shaped by the kind of calculation travel had taught him to trust. He guided the ship toward Scylla's side. Oars cut harder through the water, the hull pressed close to stone. Every sailor remained alert, hands tight on wood, eyes fixed ahead. The cliff loomed, its surface broken by ledges and hollows that suggested movement even before it occurred. Scylla responded instantly. Her heads rose in a sudden arc, faster than anticipation allowed. The attack came without warning, precise and limited. Several sailors were lifted from the deck and vanished upward, taken before cries could form. The ship lurched briefly, then steadied as momentum carried it forward. Odysseus did not turn back. The ship continued through the passage, clearing the narrowest point before the sea could draw it inward. Behind them, the strait closed again, resuming its relentless rhythm. Ahead, open water widened, offering space and breath. The cost had been measured. The ship sailed onward, damaged but intact, carrying loss rather than ruin. The crew remained silent for a long time, absorbing what had occurred without argument or protest. Each man understood the choice that had been made and the reason behind it. Scylla settled back into her place. Hunger eased. Movement slowed. The cliff reclaimed stillness as the ship receded from reach. The pattern resumed, unchanged in structure, yet altered in reputation. Word traveled. Sailors learned that the strait demanded decision rather than courage. Survival favored those willing to accept limited loss over total collapse. The passage gained clarity, its danger defined by proportion rather than mystery. Scylla remained bound to stone, her existence narrowed into moments of sudden motion, followed by long waiting. Ships continued to pass, fewer than before, each guided by calculation shaped through shared understanding. The strait no longer promised safety. It offered choice. After the passage, Scylla's existence narrowed further. Ships approached less often, and those that did arrived prepared. Oars kept strict rhythm. Crews stayed close together. Movement on deck remained minimal. The water delivered fewer opportunities, spacing encounters farther apart. Waiting filled the time between them. Scylla learned the patience of stone. Her body remained anchored to the cliff, fused so completely that separation ceased to feel imaginable. Tide marked time. Wind measured distance. Hunger rose and fell in cycles shaped by traffic through the strait. Memory persisted. She remembered the shoreline as it had once been. Open, gentle, predictable. The recollections surfaced most clearly during calm hours, when the sea lay smooth and the channel held no movement. In those moments, awareness turned inward, tracing the outline of what had been lost. The sea offered no response. Scylla's form allowed only one kind of interaction now. Her many heads remained alert, trained outward, ready to act when vibration signaled approach. The cliff gave leverage. The channel delivered opportunity. Each strike followed the same brief pattern, sudden and contained. Afterward came stillness. The strait adjusted around her presence. Currents maintained their pull. Ships that survived carried stories sharpened by clarity. Routes shifted slightly. Navigation improved. The danger settled into predictability. Scylla became part of the landscape. Sailors spoke of her as they spoke of reefs and winds, a condition to account for rather than a mystery to fear. Her name marked the cliff. Her presence defined the passage. Knowledge replaced speculation. Time passed without change. The gods offered no correction. The transformation remained intact, its consequences unfolding exactly as set in motion. Scylla's life continued within the boundaries drawn for her, sustained by the narrow role left available. She existed without release. Her hunger met its need. Her awareness endured. The cliff held fast. The sea flowed on, carrying ships that arrived ready to choose. And so Scylla remained, neither fading nor expanding, bound to a place that shaped her function and carried her story forward without pause. Over time, the fear surrounding Scylla changed its shape. At first, her name had carried urgency. Sailors whispered it before entering the strait, voices low and uncertain. Stories focused on sudden loss and the speed of her strike. The danger felt personal, unpredictable, and close. Gradually, understanding softened that edge. Experience replaced rumor. Captains learned where the currents pulled strongest, where the cliff narrowed the passage, where distance offered just enough margin. Charts improved. Instructions became precise. Crews prepared themselves long before the strait came into view. Scylla's presence grew familiar. She occupied the same ledges. Her movements followed the same brief arc. The pattern repeated with little variation. Those who entered the channel knowing what awaited them carried fewer illusions and made fewer mistakes. Fear turned into measure. Sailors accepted loss as part of the calculation. They planned for it, allocating tasks and positions with care. Those most exposed understood the risk clearly. Survival depended on coordination rather than hope. Scylla remained unchanged. She did not pursue ships that passed beyond reach. She did not adjust her territory or expand her influence. Her role stayed fixed, defined by the limits of stone and hunger. The sea delivered opportunity. She responded. This consistency shaped reputation. Scylla became less a monster and more a boundary. Her cliff marked the place where decision mattered most. Her presence defined the narrowness of the passage and the cost of misjudgment. The story lost excess. Accounts grew calmer, stripped of exaggeration. Sailors spoke plainly about what happened and why. Knowledge spread without drama, carried through repetition rather than warning. Scylla's life continued within this clarity. She waited. She struck. She rested. The rhythm held steady, unbroken by change or intervention. Her existence settled fully into function, sustained by the same forces that had shaped it from the beginning. And in that steadiness, fear lost its power to overwhelm. It became information instead. Scylla's story never reached a conclusion in the way others did. There was no final battle, no rescue, no moment when the sea loosened its hold on her form. Her life continued along the cliff in the same narrow rhythm, shaped by tide and traffic rather than change. The gods did not return to revise what had been done. The transformation remained intact. This permanence defined her. Many creatures of the sea moved, hunted, expanded, or vanished. Scylla stayed. Her presence fixed the strait into a specific shape, turning geography into consequence. Sailors passed, knowing exactly where danger waited and how little room existed for error. Time carried this understanding forward. Generations of crews repeated the same preparations. Instructions were passed down with precision. The strait became a test of judgment rather than courage. Its outcome shaped long before a ship entered the narrowing water. Scylla remained aware throughout it all. Memory stayed with her, surfacing during long stretches of stillness. She remembered the shoreline before the cliff defined her days, the ease of movement, the gentler rhythm of tide and light. These recollections arrived without comfort, lingering briefly before hunger pulled attention outward again. The sea offered neither mercy nor escalation. It delivered ships at irregular intervals, offering sustenance enough to continue without excess. Scylla's existence settled into endurance rather than struggle. The cliff held her securely. The water flowed past, indifferent and constant. Her story endured because it lacked resolution. People spoke of Scylla when describing situations shaped by constraint rather than choice. Her name entered language as a way to describe dangers that could not be removed, only managed. She represented the cost that remains when harm is unavoidable, and decisions must be weighed carefully. The strait continued to narrow and widen with tide, yet her presence remained steady. No monument marked her place. No ritual altered her fate. The sea lanes simply adjusted around her, absorbing her existence into routine. Scylla lived on in this quiet way, not as a threat that demanded conquest, but as a reality that required acceptance. As time passed, Scylla's presence settled into understanding. Sailors no longer spoke of her with panic. Her name carried precision instead. It marked a point on the map where attention sharpened and preparation mattered most. The strait became a lesson passed quietly from one voyage to the next, its danger understood through repetition rather than surprise. Scylla came to represent constraint. She existed where space narrowed and choice compressed. Her cliff offered no freedom of movement, only consequence shaped by proximity. Passing her required acceptance of limits, a willingness to choose between imperfect outcomes rather than searching for safety that did not exist. This understanding extended beyond the sea. People spoke of Scylla when describing moments where loss could not be avoided, only managed. Her name described decisions made under pressure, where harm arrived in measured portions rather than total collapse. The story traveled inland, detached from waves and stone, settling into thought and language. Her endurance gave the lesson weight. Unlike creatures defeated or transformed again, Scylla remained exactly where she had been placed. The absence of resolution sharpened her meaning. She stood as a reminder that some outcomes persist beyond intention, shaped by actions taken long before those affected could respond. The sea carried on around her. Ships continued to pass, guided by charts and memory. Crews prepared without ceremony, trusting methods refined over generations. Loss occurred rarely, and when it did, it followed expectations rather than shock. Scylla waited. Her role did not expand. Her hunger followed its rhythm. The cliff held her steady, and the water delivered what it always had. Awareness remained intact, turning outward when movement approached, inward when stillness returned. Her story endured because it reflected reality without offering escape. It acknowledged that some dangers become permanent features of the world. They shape behavior not through fear, but through familiarity. Survival depends on recognition rather than confrontation. As the tale settled into tradition, Scylla's presence softened into clarity. She remained where land and sea pressed tightly together, marking the place where understanding mattered more than strength. Scylla never left the cliff. She did not fade into obscurity, nor was she overtaken by some later force that rewrote her place in the world. Her existence remained exactly where it had been fixed, woven into the narrow strait as firmly as the stone itself. The sea adjusted around her, carrying forward the routines shaped by long familiarity. Memory did the rest. Sailors passed her story down with care, not as a tale meant to frighten, but as knowledge meant to prepare. Instructions remained simple. Stay alert. Hold course. Accept that some passages demand loss rather than escape. The lesson endured because it reflected reality without distortion. Scylla's meaning outlasted her encounters. She became a reference for moments when no option offers safety, only proportion. Her name came to describe decisions made under pressure, where the cost is known and avoidance leads to something worse. The strait carried that understanding outward, embedding it into habit and language. The gods did not revisit her fate. What had been set in motion reached equilibrium on its own. The transformation held. The consequence remained contained. The world adapted around it, absorbing the presence without seeking resolution. Scylla remained aware. Her hunger followed its rhythm. Her attention turned outward when vibration signaled approach, inward when the sea lay still. Memory surfaced without comfort, then settled again. The cliff held her. The water delivered what it would. Nothing more was required. Her story endured precisely because it stopped changing. It asked no final question. It offered no release. It remained a constant, shaping behavior quietly through understanding rather than fear. And so Scylla rested within memory, not defeated, not redeemed, but accepted. A presence fixed to stone. A lesson carried forward. A passage shaped by choice rather than hope. The place where the Hydra lived already felt unsettled. South of familiar roads and cultivated land stretched a region avoided through experience rather than superstition. The ground stayed soft beneath every step, soaked by stagnant water that never fully withdrew. Mist lingered low even at midday, blurring distance and dulling sound. Footprints faded quickly, voices dissolved before traveling far. This was the marsh of Lerna. The terrain resisted passage. Pools appeared where firm earth was expected. Reeds grew thick enough to hide movement, yet too fragile to bear weight. Animals entered rarely, and those that did passed through briefly before retreating. People learned to keep their distance. Water drawn from the marsh was left untouched. Crops planted nearby withered. Livestock wandered too close and vanished. Over time, the marsh expanded almost imperceptibly, claiming ground season by season. Paths shifted. Familiar routes softened. What had once felt dependable gradually lost its certainty. The land absorbed presence. That quality made it suitable. Dangerous beings were rarely scattered at random. The gods favored locations already unstable, places where disruption could settle rather than spread. Certain regions became reservoirs for what ordinary life could not accommodate. Lerna became one of those regions. Long before the Hydra revealed itself, signs of its presence surfaced. Water stirred without surface cause. Heavy movement passed beneath the marsh, disturbing it without breaking through. At night, the mist thickened and sank lower, responding to something large and coiled beneath it. Curiosity never took hold. Silence allowed the marsh to deepen into itself. Whatever lived within remained undisturbed, feeding, growing. adjusting to the space prepared for it. The creature stayed where it had been placed. The marsh provided everything it required. By the time the Hydra fully occupied Lerna, the surrounding land had already slipped beyond human use. That was the first indication that the creature belonged there by design. The Hydra came into being through intention rather than chance. Its origin traced back to Hera, whose influence often took shape through endurance and consequence rather than spectacle. Her concerns rarely unfolded quickly. They settled, waited, and matured over time, shaping outcomes long after the initial cause faded from view. At the heart of her attention stood Heracles. His presence disrupted balance wherever he traveled. Strength followed him easily. Survival bent in his favor. Each trial intended to break him instead became another confirmation that force alone carried him forward. This troubled Hera, who valued order sustained over time rather than victories won through momentum. A response formed quietly. Rather than confronting Heracles directly, she sought a challenge that strength would struggle to resolve. Something that resisted simple solutions. Something that demanded patience, adaptation, and restraint. The creature would remain contained, waiting in place, shaping the land around it rather than roaming freely. For this purpose, the marsh of Lerna served perfectly. The Hydra was shaped to belong there. Its body grew long and heavy, suited for waterlogged ground. Multiple necks rose from a single mass, each capable of independent movement and attention. Heads formed with identical hunger and awareness, able to act without waiting for command. Beneath them, the body remained anchored, coiled and resilient, feeding steadily from the environment prepared for it. The most important aspect of the Hydra emerged from its design. Injury led to growth. When one head fell, two rose in its place. The creature adapted instantly, turning attack into expansion. This trait did not exist as spectacle, it existed as instruction. Violence applied thoughtlessly would only deepen the problem. Effort without strategy would multiply resistance. One head differed from the others. Buried among the living necks rested one that endured beyond the cycle of replacement. This head carried permanence. It anchored the creature's existence, ensuring that the Hydra could persist even as its form shifted repeatedly. The Hydra settled into Lerna easily. The marsh supported it. The water concealed movement. The ground softened beneath its weight. Over time, the creature and the land adjusted to one another, forming a stable relationship. The Hydra did not need to expand outward. Everything required for its survival lay within reach. Its presence carried a purpose beyond fear. The creature existed as a test shaped in advance, a problem placed patiently into the world, waiting for the moment when strength would meet its limits and strategy would be required to continue. That moment approached steadily. Word of the Hydra spread along nearby paths and settlements. People spoke of danger contained within the marsh, a threat best avoided rather than challenged. The creature remained undisturbed, coiled within its domain, growing accustomed to stillness and repetition. Eventually, the path toward Lerna would be walked deliberately, and when that happened, the Hydra would fulfill exactly the role it had been given. The Hydra did not announce its presence with spectacle. Its influence reached outward first, carried by consequence. Shepherds spoke of animals lost near the marsh. Travelers altered routes after glimpsing movement beneath the water's surface. The air around Lerna felt heavier, carrying a sharp scent that lingered long after people left its edge. Over time, the stories sharpened. Those who ventured too close described a vast shape rising from the reeds, necks lifting independently, eyes fixed without blinking. The creature moved with patience, conserving effort, waiting for proximity before reacting. When it struck, the motion came quickly, followed by retreat into cover. The marsh protected it instinctively. Water closed over disturbances. Reeds swallowed sound. Ground yielded under weight, slowing pursuit. The Hydra learned the space through repetition, adjusting its position slightly over time, never straying far from the deepest pools where footing failed most easily. Its intelligence emerged gradually. The Hydra learned where people hesitated. It sensed patterns in approach and withdrawal. When threatened, it shifted position instead of charging, letting the land exhaust those who tried to follow. Each encounter refined its awareness, turning the marsh into an extension of its body. The heads acted together without confusion. Each watched a different angle. Each reacted to movement independently, then fed information back into the whole. When danger approached from one side, the body adjusted accordingly, bringing additional heads into position with slow precision. Poison seeped into the air around it. Breath carried a corrosive force that burned skin and clouded senses. Water fouled near the creature's resting place, turning stagnant pools dangerous to drink from. The marsh grew increasingly hostile the longer the Hydra remained undisturbed. People stopped approaching altogether. Lerna became marked by avoidance. Paths shifted outward. Settlements relocated. The creature achieved exactly what it had been shaped to do: control territory through presence alone. Eventually, the stories reached someone accustomed to walking toward danger. Heracles listened carefully. The reports described a creature that multiplied when attacked, a presence rooted deeply into hostile terrain, a threat that endured beyond ordinary solutions. Strength alone would struggle here. Persistence without adjustment would fail. This made the Hydra different from previous challenges. It waited. The marsh remained still as Heracles approached its edge, carrying preparation along with him. The creature sensed the change immediately. Movement settled deeper beneath the water. Heads lifted slowly, tracking sound and vibration through reeds and mud. The test had arrived. The Hydra held its ground, coiled and aware, ready to respond to whatever stepped into Lerna next. Heracles entered the marsh with deliberate care. He moved slowly, testing each step before committing weight, learning the ground as he advanced. The air felt thicker here, carrying a sharpness that irritated the lungs. Water rippled ahead of him without visible cause. Reeds bent outward, parting just enough to suggest scale without revealing form. Then the Hydra rose. Multiple heads emerged first, lifting above the marsh in a slow, coordinated motion. Each neck arched independently, swaying slightly as eyes fixed on the intruder. The body followed only partially, remaining anchored in deeper water, where footing collapsed under pressure. The creature assessed distance, timing, and intent before acting. Heracles advanced. He struck quickly, relying on speed and power honed through earlier trials. One head fell beneath his blow, severed cleanly. The marsh reacted instantly. From the wounded neck, two new heads pushed forward, growing rapidly, fully formed and alert. The pattern repeated. Each strike removed a head. Each removal expanded the problem. The creature absorbed force and returned it multiplied, adjusting its position to keep its core protected. The marsh worked in its favor, slowing movement and draining momentum. Poison filled the space between them. Breath burned, skin stung. Water splashed upward, fouling weapons and footing alike. Heracles felt the cost of proximity increase with each exchange. Strength remained intact, but progress vanished. The Hydra pressed forward gradually. Heads snapped in alternating rhythms, forcing retreat rather than advance. One misstep sank a foot deep into the marsh, anchoring him briefly while heads closed distance. The creature understood reach. It understood restraint. It waited for imbalance. Heracles withdrew. This was not retreat born of fear. It was recognition. The approach he had relied upon before carried him only deeper into resistance. The Hydra responded to force with growth, turning effort into advantage. Observation replaced momentum. From firmer ground, Heracles watched the creature settle back into its coils. The heads remained elevated, tracking his position, ready to rise again if provoked. The central mass stayed submerged, protected, patient. One detail stood out. Among the shifting heads, one remained lower, heavier, slower to move. It never lunged first. It never overextended. It stayed close to the body, guarded instinctively by the others. Understanding formed. The Hydra could not be overcome through repetition. Each attempt strengthened it. A different approach would be required, one that altered the outcome of injury itself. Heracles turned away from the marsh, not defeated, but recalibrating. The Hydra watched him leave, unmoving. The land returned to stillness. The creature had fulfilled its design perfectly, meeting strength with expansion, and waiting to see whether intelligence would follow. Preparation changed the shape of the encounter. Heracles returned with intention refined by observation. Alongside him came Aeolus, younger in years and steadier in judgment. He carried torches wrapped tightly, their flames fed and guarded against damp air. Fire brought a different language into Lerna, one the marsh had never learned to answer. They advanced together. Heracles drew the Hydra's attention as before, stepping into range until the heads rose to meet him. Movement followed the familiar pattern. A strike fell. A head dropped. Growth surged at the wound. This time, Flame followed immediately. Aeolus pressed fire to the severed neck. Heat sealed flesh and halted the surge at its source. The air filled with sharp smoke. The Hydra recoiled, heads pulling back in a ripple of reaction. The marsh responded unevenly to flame, water steaming where heat touched it, reeds curling away from sparks. The rhythm shifted. Strike, seal. Each cycle reduced the creature's options. Heads fell and failed to return. The Hydra adapted quickly, withdrawing farther into water, tightening its coil, guarding the lower neck more fiercely. Poison thickened the air, forcing careful distance. Still, the pattern held. Pressure mounted. The Hydra surged forward in a heavy wave, attempting to overwhelm through reach and mass. Heracles met the push directly, anchoring his footing on firmer ground prepared in advance. He forced the creature upward, exposing more of its body to light and flame. The guarded neck emerged, shorter, thicker, heavier. This was the anchor, the head bound to the creature's endurance. Heracles seized it, lifting with controlled force, drawing it clear of the marsh's support. The remaining heads lashed outward, but the pattern had broken. Fire and coordination had reduced their advantage. The final blow landed cleanly. The immortal head fell and ceased movement. Flame followed once more, sealing the base. With its anchor removed, the Hydra's body slackened. The remaining heads stilled. The marsh settled around the weight of what had been holding it for so long. Silence returned to Lerna. The air cleared gradually. Water slowed. Reeds straightened as steam dissipated. The creature's form lay partially submerged, its influence lifting from the land that had supported it. Heracles and Aeolus stood back. The solution had emerged through partnership, timing, and restraint. Force opened the problem. Fire resolved it. The marsh released what it had been holding. The Hydra's role had ended. What remained would carry forward, shaping events far beyond Lerna. The marsh did not return to itself all at once. After the Hydra fell, Lerna remained quiet for a long while, as though the land itself needed time to adjust to the absence of what had shaped it. Water settled slowly. The mist thinned day by day. Reeds stopped shifting without cause. Paths near the edge grew firmer beneath cautious steps. Yet traces endured. The Hydra's blood seeped into the ground where its body lay. It carried the same corrosive power as its breath, saturating earth and water alike. Pools darkened where it touched them. Plants nearby withered. The danger had changed form, concentrating into something smaller, sharper, and easier to overlook. Heracles understood the value of this residue. He dipped the tips of his arrows into the Hydra's blood, coating them carefully. What had once poisoned the marsh now traveled with him, carried deliberately rather than spreading unchecked. Each arrow became an extension of the creature's legacy, its power repurposed through intention. The decision carried weight. The Hydra had been shaped to resist force. Its defeat required cooperation and strategy. Its remains demanded restraint. Even in death, the creature punished carelessness and rewarded precision. The lesson continued beyond the marsh. News spread quickly. People returned to Lerna with caution rather than relief. The marsh remained marked, yet usable. Its threat no longer expanded outward. The land settled into something closer to stability, shaped by memory rather than fear. Among the gods, the outcome registered quietly. The creature had fulfilled its role. It tested strength and exposed its limits. It required adaptation to overcome. That knowledge carried forward, influencing future trials and shaping expectations placed upon those who walked similar paths. The Hydra did not vanish from the world. Its presence shifted into story and consequence. Its blood traveled with Heracles. Its reputation settled into warning. Its design continued to influence how challenges were understood. What had been contained within Lerna now moved outward, guided by choice rather than instinct. The marsh no longer held the creature. The world carried it instead. The defeat of the Hydra altered expectations. Until Lerna, success had followed a familiar shape. Strength confronted danger. Persistence wore resistance down. Victory arrived through endurance. The Hydra broke that pattern quietly and permanently. It revealed a different truth. Some problems deepen when pushed directly. Word of the encounter traveled with Heracles. People repeated the details carefully. The creature that multiplied under attack. The marsh that turned effort against the one applying it. The solution that emerged only when force paused long enough for thought to enter. These details mattered. They reshaped how challenges were approached. Caution gained value. Preparation gained respect. The idea of stepping back in order to move forward settled into shared understanding. The Hydra's influence extended far beyond its body. The poisoned arrows carried its presence into later encounters, changing outcomes that would otherwise have followed familiar paths. Each time one was used, the lesson of Lerna echoed quietly, that adaptation leaves marks long after the original problem is gone. Even the land reflected this shift. Lerna remained avoided, yet no longer feared in the same way. People understood its boundaries. They respected what had shaped it. The marsh became a place remembered for transformation rather than threat. The gods observed without intervention. The test had succeeded. Strength had reached its limit. Cooperation and restraint had completed what power alone could not. The balance held. The Hydra's story no longer belonged to the marsh. It belonged to the idea that victory changes meaning depending on how it is achieved. And that meaning continued to ripple outward, influencing choices long after the creature itself had settled into memory. The Hydra remained present long after its body sank into the marsh. Its name began to circulate in a new way, detached from place and shape. People used it to describe problems that grew when attacked carelessly. Situations where effort multiplied resistance. Conflicts that demanded patience instead of persistence. The creature became a reference point. When leaders faced unrest that escalated under pressure, they spoke of Lerna. When healers encountered ailments that worsened under rough treatment, they recalled the Hydra's blood. When travelers debated routes through dangerous terrain, they remembered how the marsh had turned strength against itself. The lesson endured because it applied broadly. The Hydra taught that some challenges require division rather than force, that cutting blindly creates more to contend with, that restraint, timing, and coordination matter as much as power. This understanding settled quietly into habit. People approached problems differently. They observed longer. They tested smaller responses. They watched for anchors hidden beneath surface threats, the source that sustained everything else. Even the gods acknowledged the shift. The Hydra had served its purpose without spectacle. It shaped behavior without conquest. It altered expectations without leaving ruins behind. Its influence spread through thought rather than fear. The creature no longer needed a body. It existed wherever repetition replaced strategy, wherever escalation followed intervention. Its presence lived on in caution, in planning, in the pause before action. Lerna returned to stillness. The marsh held its shape. The mist thinned. Water flowed with clearer boundaries. The land remembered what it had supported, then released it. And so the Hydra passed fully into story, not as a beast to be slain again, but as a reminder carried forward, quietly influencing how people chose to confront what resisted them. The Hydra endured because it was never only a creature. It existed as a situation shaped into flesh, a problem designed to respond, adapt, and persist. Its body expressed an idea the world needed to encounter directly. Some threats expand under pressure. Some dangers reward force with complexity. Some challenges resist resolution until their source is understood. That understanding took form at Lerna. The Hydra showed that growth can be defensive, that multiplication can be a response to harm rather than a sign of strength. Its many heads reflected a single truth repeated too often. Addressing symptoms without addressing cause leads only to escalation. The gods allowed this lesson to settle slowly. They placed the creature where it could remain contained. They shaped it with intention. They allowed it to persist until intelligence caught up with power. When the balance shifted, the creature receded without spectacle. This was enough. The Hydra did not require worship. It did not demand remembrance through fear. Its survival depended on relevance. As long as problems grew when mishandled, the Hydra remained present. As long as force tempted people to act without understanding, its story retained value. It lived on wherever patience succeeded where effort failed. The marsh of Lerna quieted. Water reclaimed its rhythm. Reeds straightened. The land resumed its slow negotiation with those who approached it carefully. What remained was memory, not of danger, but of adaptation. The Hydra's final gift was perspective, a reminder that strength reaches further when guided, that restraint shapes outcomes more cleanly than repetition, and that some victories arrive only when the impulse to strike gives way to the decision to understand. As the story settles, it carries that lesson gently forward, resting where reflection replaces urgency. And with that, the creature returns fully to stillness.